They had an only daughter, as beautiful as the very goddess of youth. He was 23 years old, had a fine figure, attractive looks, and a frankness of character totally suited to harmonise with that of his beautiful cousin. He had a very handsome carriage, 2 lackeys, a valet de chambre, a large amount of jewellery, a wallet full of letters of credit, and the finest clothes in the world. Nobody could have been better dressed, shown better taste, or have had more honourable bearing, but as we have said, there was something indefinable about this man's face, which immediately seemed repellent, and it was only through very artful manners and much expressive play with his features that he succeeded in concealing this defect. What did his face matter? At this point the Baron was asked to explain his situation. He rushed to see his mistress and was dismayed by the coldness she displayed. He sent superb gifts to his future wife, who, with the agreement of her parents, accepted the amorous attentions of a man she could regard as her husband. This man, who said that I was robbing him of his life's happiness, attempted to fight me and gave me a blow with his sword, which I shall return, I hope, within 4 days. Money was needed. When she refused, he sent a second message assuring his cousin that what he had to tell her was too important for her to refuse to listen to him. Will you condescend, at the height of your triumph, to remember those delightful times when you vowed that you would never belong to anyone but me? Well? The next day she was occupied with the preparations for departure. Anyone who puts herself in her place for a moment can judge the terrible effect on her sensitive and gentle soul as the illusion which had attracted her collapsed so suddenly. After my unfortunate experiences, I joined a troop of bandits who were devastating the central provinces of France, a disastrous lesson for young men who let themselves be led astray by the crazy passion for gambling. Let us come back to us two, madame. There are some traces of honour in the minds of villains, and virtue has such value in the eyes of men that even the most corrupt are forced to pay homage to it on endless occasions during their lives. She barely managed to reach the bed she was shown, and falling into an exhausted sleep, she was at least left in peace, there until the following morning. When he saw that she was calmer, he suggested she should look around the settlement. Also, with this chance of seeing many men, she could possibly have the means of saving them and escaping with them. She shuddered as she opened this letter, and suspecting the nature of its contents, she was about to hesitate a moment between the idea of killing herself rather than causing the death of these unfortunate men. But if it is true that you love me, as you have often deigned to tell me, would you not be heartbroken to see me on the scaffold beside you? "Stop, madame, stop!" shouted their commanding officer, dismounting from his horse and throwing himself at her feet in order to disarm her. Let the sensitive soul who shows concern for me condescend to obtain from me one favour only, permission for the dragoons to blow my brains out. Farewell, mademoiselle. He was sent there before he had reached the age of 12. He grew up close to this uncle in the career which he intended to follow, and in the exercise of every virtue. Just when she was about to run away with part of the money, the theft had fortunately been prevented, but it had not been possible to seize the guilty pair, who were, it was said, in England. Various brides had been offered to him. He had refused them all, for he said he saw no clear enough signs in any of these women that he could be certain of being loved one day. He mounted his horse, followed only by a single valet, and rode towards the French chateau, which was about 5 leagues away from his own. I shall announce you to her parents, monsieur, but I warn you that they are bitterly angry. She can do as she likes. We abandon her to the destiny of heaven, hoping that in its just way it will soon avenge us for such a daughter. I do not forgive myself, since I was certain about their attitude, for not having spared you such a disagreeable visit, and these words were accompanied by a flood of tears. He had always said that he wanted the woman to whom he would give his hand to be linked to him in some way by gratitude, and that he was aspired to hold her, so to speak, only by that feeling. He told him that his daughter was living in his house, that he was taking the greatest care of her and her child. A girl who loves her parents never behaves like that. Do not, through atrocious egoism, make them the eternal victims of your avarice and your ambition. For us she is a stranger whom chance has placed in your hands. She becomes free because of her age, her behaviour, and our abandonment. In short, monsieur, you are free to do whatever you like with her. She tried to speak. He had now come to ask for her good wishes and to take leave of her before going to seek his fortune elsewhere. Everything in the chateau was calm and contented. The day after our arrival in the new house where you were hoping to settle, a dose of this, and she pulled out of her pocket a sachet of poison, would have been added to your food, and you would have died 6 hours later. It was from his hand also that I received the poison that was to end your days. These 2 facts sufficed to establish my entire story. No, I am wrong in asking you for tears. I do not deserve them, and since you are kind enough to shed them, allow me, in order to dry them, to remind you only of my misdeeds. If, held back by the remorse we feel when we break through this first restraint, we had the strength to go no further, the rights of virtue would never completely die away, but our weakness destroys us, bad advice corrupts us, dangerous examples pervert us, all perils seem to vanish, and the veil is torn only when the sword of justice finally halts the course of crime. Regarding the throne as one of the surest ways to guarantee his own impunity, he had risked everything in order to gain it. If he who commits an outrage can quickly forget the injuries he has inflicted, the person who has suffered them has at least the right to remember them. However, the danger increased. The unfortunate monarch was just about to be toppled from his throne. Some were tearing out their hair, others were trying to stab themselves. A moment later he found himself with his guide at the base of the tower, in the same hall as the statue of Time. But he had barely walked 100 paces when his head swam. Learn that he is much less so than you are, for hunger, the most imperious of his needs, is the sole cause of his cruel acts, while yours have been inspired simply by the most atrocious passions. Huge snakes emerged from the depths of this river and added more horror to those hideous shadows floating on its surface. They flattered me and frightened me in turn, and I listened to the lamentable things they told me, without being able to understand them. The further it went, the more its speed increased. The storm redoubled in strength. However, whirlwinds of fire continually leapt out of the sky, while flashes of lightning cut across the horizon, incessantly shattering and intersecting each other in all directions. All is equal in the eyes of God. So disorder is necessary for the maintenance of celestial things. The proud Spaniard vigorously attacked the first giant who presented himself. "The leader of the Moors," replied the warrior. "My duties, your age, everything demands that you must. And what vows must I make to you?" However, he concealed his thoughts. Deception is the art of the villain. It is the means by which he commits all his wicked deeds. Make a success of this plan. Get yourself loved by my son's mistress, and I shall make you one of the greatest lords in Tuscany. Since she had never been her mistress's rival, why should she have envied her? He was wrong. Can anything other than wild beasts live in such a place? "My dear daughter," he then replied, "I think you lend too much importance to dissipations which I myself have advised. I shall go to join my husband on the battlefields of Tuscany. I shall go to share his fate, and whatever dangers may threaten me, they will still be less horrible than those I see around me in this house." She described how she wished to leave it, how she needed to join her husband immediately, or else that he should come to see her for at least one day. "Yes, I have sent a letter." Eventually, this terrible moment arrived. She opened her eyes. "Your action, occasioned by your remorse, does not move me in the least. She stretched out her beautiful arms towards her husband, weeping bitterly. "Is it true? My husband accuses me." "What more do you want, my son? What more do you need before you punish this wretched girl and avenge the damage to your honour? Be aware of them before removing your love from me, and do not scorn me before you are better informed." His father took care not to leave him and to rally him if he weakened. This unnatural talk did not shock her. "These recriminations are superfluous now. You must accept your fate. Let me go to my death rather than to dishonour, Seigneur." Such were the confused feelings that tore her apart, such were the chaotic ideas that filled her imagination. "Otherwise I can vouch for nothing on your behalf." "No," she said. "No more pity," he said to his victim. "Let us allow him to live." All these men, at the side on the banks of the Somme, preoccupied only with conquest or with meeting a death worthy of their leader, forgot, beneath his banners, the pleasures of their own province. His youthful spirit had need of all the love that inflamed it, otherwise he would have been angered by the way these arrangements delayed his success in the army. How can the lover concerned with making himself worthy of bringing you happiness be forbidden to know if he can claim to do so? She then intended to take advantage of the state of mind she would create within him in order to influence him gradually in her favour, imagining, like a clever woman, that pique would bring her what she could not obtain by love. And what if your lover had met the same fate as your father? What if you had been forced to weep for him like this? But the perfidious Countess was very careful not to let him see any more. Does one know, at her age, whom one loves? I dared to suspect you of a wrong which is only the result of love. I am going to bring him to the chateau. No, I shall never believe it. Could you conceal it from yourself, this passion that is aroused by your presence, ungrateful man? No, I must be fair. Let us seek other means and conceal our decisions from him. She loved him too much in the depths of her heart to risk even jests about something so sacred. Several days passed again. By me, Seigneur? Oh, madame, he cried in tears, never will these hands dare attack a being who resembles me, and murder is the most terrible of crimes. So far, the attitudes of this treacherous woman appear suspect, no doubt. She will be waiting for him. They will leave together before midnight. May you read deep in my heart the feelings with which you inspire me. Know your error and live afterwards if you can. My soul will follow her to the feet of the Eternal One. The Countess alone survived these crimes, but she was to mourn them all her life. She threw herself into the most intense piety and died 10 years later as a nun in Auxerre, leaving the community edified by her conversion and truly moved by the sincerity of her remorse.